Good day, all. Welcome back to another episode of the Woods Collab podcast. This is
Nikisha Woods.
And I'm Mike Woods, and we are the Woods Collab. We hope everyone is doing fine and doing well. Nikisha, today we shall discuss, share perspectives, share thoughts, provoke some thoughts and comments and insight on diversity. So let's get right into it. Cool?
Yes. So this is definitely a loaded topic, and I know we're only going to hang out for a few minutes, but I feel like at least we can scratch the surface when it comes to diversity. Mm-hmm. So we are not diverse from each other. I mean, we have our own differences. You're an extrovert. I am an introvert, even though you told me I'm not. But at the end of the day, everybody is different in their own way, and something makes them unique. But we have our own identifiers. And so with those identifiers, I identify as a Black woman, you identify as a Black man, and together when we're in a house, diversity is not found by our race or ethnicity or a culture, it's found in other ways. Sometimes in a workplace, we are the only in a setting, right? So I may be the only woman, I may be the only Black person, and so we just wanted to talk about that a little bit because sometimes I'm more aware of the fact that I'm Black than others.
Yeah, that awareness is important. Awareness of oneself, and of course, awareness of others. Because as you mentioned, the diversity in general is such a broad topic, and you can be different from others in a number of ways. Like you talk about race and gender, ethnicity, age, religion, interest, education, hobbies. Things that you enjoy, all of those type of things, as far as like you're different, even personal things that you deal with.
Yeah.
Family, one may be dealing with this and one may be dealing with that, and one may have never experienced a thing, one may have also experienced a thing. So how do you maneuver through being different when you're in a professional setting?
Yeah, I think that's a really great point that you brought up about, like, we hold all of these things. If you think about us as people being a box, we have all these things that make us who we are. And on the outside, you see that box, but you don't really know what's going on the inside. And it's a complete hoax or myth to think that just because I am showing up in a work setting, that I am not still who I am to the core, my experiences and things like that. And so that's why we really have to be sensitive to the people that are in our work environments and how we're communicating with them, and also being sensitive to who they are so that they can add value from a place of strength and not feel excluded or like they're not a part of the group or a part of the team.
Right.
So Mike, I know we pregame you all, so we kind of like talk it out a little bit beforehand. But I talked to you and told you that in my experiences in seeing you, and no matter which setting you have been in, you have been unapologetically you as a Black man, from my lens and my perspective. How do you do that regardless of what room you're in, who's in the room with you, your own diversity, and just really truly owning who you are?
Great question. I appreciate that. I think it also comes with learning yourself and understanding the value of what you bring to the table, and understanding your own identity. Because it didn't happen. Because I could reflect back when I was younger. There was a time, probably before, if I had to put my finger on it, according to my own assessment, maybe before, say, 11th grade in high school.
Oh, that's a long time ago.
It wasn't that long ago. It was just a couple of years ago. That's when I started to really consciously become aware that I am who I am. I'm unique in my personality, things I'm into, things of that nature. So when you tie this to a professional self, it comes with, things that we've studied, things that we've read, and of course, learning yourself and knowing yourself, this, that, and the other, and then learning how to work with people, learning how to work with and maneuver in an organizational setting, learn, okay, I'm at this company, what are the rules and the norms and what's taboo in this company? And then you see, okay, well, how do I fit in? Maybe how do I don't fit in? Maybe this is a fit, maybe this is not a fit. So over time, it was a journey for me to, some of it is like trial and error, because sometimes you may interact with others or be in certain settings, you'd be like, you know what, I'm not feeling that.
Yeah.
This is not working because I don't feel comfortable here. But then over time, you start to put yourself in positions and you start to work with people and companies where you do feel comfortable. Let's say you're on a certain team or you're working with a certain company. If you don't fit and mesh with that company, maybe that company is not for you.
Yeah.
Just maybe not. You could try to do your thing, but just maybe it's not for you.
Yeah.
But you got to learn it yourself, and you got to have a certain level of comfort and confidence in order to make that decision. Mm-hmm. So for me, knowing who I am, knowing my identity, knowing what I'm willing to accept, knowing that there's some things I'm not willing to accept, putting myself in position, I just have I don't want to say a natural, but a confidence now where I know that I can be myself in any situation. Mm-hmm. And I'm passionate about being able to be myself in those situations.
Yeah.
So if it's a situation where I don't feel that I can be myself, more than likely, since that's for the lack of a better term, a deal breaker for me, I'm probably not going to be in that space.
Oh. So yeah, and I think that for me, it definitely was not the 11th grade. It was much later in life. And in environments where people had similar identifiers to me, for many years, I worked in an environment where most people were my race, culture, gender, and that was the environment that I worked in, that I could focus on the work me, doing the work, understanding the strategy, the process, the goals that I had around that particular job. But then when I found myself in a space where people didn't look like me, didn't talk like me, didn't act like me, I was super aware of the fact that I was different, but not just because I was different, but because they treated me differently. And so they treated me differently, and there's a term called microaggressions. So some folks may be familiar with that term, but when to me, a simple way of explaining a microaggression is when people say or do things that remind you of your difference. And so I'd just be going along my day, and then people would make comments or say things or spotlight me if there was a conversation or a topic around being Black or Black people. And I would just go back into that shell. And so I couldn't produce the same because I knew that everybody was like, wow, I was literally the only Black person at that company. And so I was very aware of it, and I was reminded of it. And so
let me ask you a question right there.
Yeah.
So when you got those comments, or those microaggressions came out from others, did you respond to it?
No, I ignored it because at the time I didn't know what it was. I just knew that I felt uncomfortable. Like you talked about being comfortable, I felt uncomfortable. And so then I would just go back to like a shell or a corner and just focus on the work, just focus on doing the thing. And so it was after I left that environment and went into an environment that was a lot more welcoming and started to do study the concepts of diversity, equity, inclusion. I'm like, oh, there's a name for this. Like, this is a thing. This is why I felt this way. I started to get more comfortable in my own skin and so forth. But even with a new environment, I felt like that safety place was to hide a piece of my identity as much as I could. And that term is called covering. And so I would do things like code switch. And if you're not familiar with the term code switching, it's when you cover a piece of your identity by, let's say, changing the way that you speak when you are at home with your family versus how you are at work. And so we had a really good conversation about it because we grew up being raised to think you have to act professional, you have to speak professionally, you have to do these things when you're in a professional workplace.
Right. And
so talk to me about like your thoughts around code switching, professionalism, what is and what isn't considered professionalism.
Good. And I want to answer too. I think one of the differences, you said how I was able to be diverse or different in certain situations. Like you mentioned, when those things are made, a lot of times I will respond to those comments. Like you said, you put the cover up. I would respond to it. I would, hey, let's get some clarity here, because I want to seek to understand or call out the thing as well, and then that provides comfort because I know at a certain point. Because even when I was a kid, there's certain things I wouldn't question, and as I grew up and got older, I learned the value of asking questions and the value of asking the right questions. That's why even now, I ask a lot of questions in order to get the answers. So I was, hey, what do you mean by that? Hey, did you just say that? Or make a comment back, and sometimes that comment will come with sarcasm.
Okay.
But yeah, you can see that.
I can see you doing that.
Yeah. So when it comes to say code switching or what's professional and this, that, and the other, I think that's a term that's up to the people who's doing the assessing, or it depends on the people who's doing the assessing. Because if I could view so and so over here and I say, well, that person is code switching, changing it up, that's also my perception. So that person could also be one that, and I'm not sure if this will fall under the category of code switching. Maybe that person just communicates different when you're talking to different people. Because to a point, most do it. So I'll give an extreme example. When you and I are talking, even though I do talk to babies a little bit different at times, it's
Hopefully you talk to a baby different than you talk to me. I'm just saying.
But it's a joke if you try. If my sister family's watching, you talk to a baby and it's funny. Talk to a baby as if you're speaking to an adult.
Okay.
A baby. I'm talking about a baby that does not even talk.
Okay.
It's like, hey, how's it going? How's your day going on? Really? So what do you think about what's going on in the news right now? Those type of conversations. But generally, you wouldn't do that.
No.
So you're about the Gaga Google, right?
I don't even know where this is going. That's what
I'm going to. It all ties back to code switching.
Okay.
So think about when is it okay, when is it not? Because in a professional setting, we say, you're switching up over here, you're talking this way, or over here, you're talking this way. Code switching. But when you're talking to a baby, you only talk to a baby a certain way, and you flip to talk, and baby don't understand the Google Gaga. But when you talk to an adult, you speak in a different way. So when you're in a professional setting, that person could very well be communicating or getting a point across to the best of their ability or to their comfort level and how they communicate. So that's why I say it all goes back to the person that's doing the assessing, because it's all a personal opinion, if you will.
So I'm gonna disagree a little bit. I am.
Please
This
do.
is what we do, right? Because we're diverse, right? So I feel that it's up to the person who is making the change in how they're communicating. And I say that as a person who code switched because I didn't want to be judged harshly or treated unfairly in that particular setting. It wasn't like, yeah, you know what, I just want to be more professional in this situation. And then if you see this code switching, it is. If you don't, it's not. It was, if I use slang like my counterpart who's of a different race, then I'm perceived as ghetto or less than or less qualified or less educated. And so it was an armor for me to speak a certain way where I was terrified to use slang, or I was very uncomfortable using it. And in some situations, if someone who looks like me used it a lot, it made me feel uncomfortable. And so for me, that's where that energy comes from, because it's constantly thinking, did I pronounce this word correctly? Did I say this the right way? Why did they look at me when I said this word? Did they understand what I meant? And so that takes the energy and the authenticity away from who I am. And in that environment that I spoke of, by the time I got home at the end of the day, I was exhausted, because between the microaggressions and the code switching and the covering and the feeling like I'm an alien, I didn't have the energy left to do the work. So yes, I do think that some people strategically do it. And some people, have their own reasons for doing it. But for me, in my case, in my experiences, it wasn't just just a mood type thing. Because I know when you talk to your boys, your friends, you probably don't talk to them like you talk to me. I get that. But does it cause you more energy to go from your conversation with them to your conversation with me? Does it make you exhausted? Are you fearful you probably are fearful to talk to me like you talk to them.
No, but I think, to go back, I think we actually agree, because you were the one doing the assessing. So when I say the one doing the assessing, I'm not even speaking just outside looking in.
Okay.
If you're looking at yourself, you're the one doing the assessing. So for me, I don't assess it that way. I'm like, okay, let me exist in this moment. And like you said, I may talk to the fellas different than I talk to somebody at work.
Yeah.
Is that code switching? I don't know if it is or it isn't, but that's what it is. My communication is going to be different. Even my communication is on social media is different than it is in a casual conversation. That's just how I choose to communicate or articulate certain things. The other thing you mentioned as far as professionalism, so diversity in a professional space, I think that also goes to the rules of the place that you're in. So, for instance, some companies, t-shirt, you're unprofessional. Some, you wear a t-shirt, you fit right in. Some shorts, unprofessional. Some spots, you wear shorts, you fit right in. That's professional. So it really depends on what the rules are. The rules, and I think they change and they vary from company to company, organization to organization, business relationship to business relationship, personal relationship to personal relationship. But I think they differ depending on what are those written, unwritten, or understood rules between the two.
Okay.
What you think?
Yeah, I do think there's a certain thing, like things that are rules and you want to follow the rules. I think that when it's how you identify and who you are as a person and your culture, when we make rules around how someone shows up in that way, right? Like, then that's where they're going to not just mask the fact that they maybe use slang or there's certain jokes or certain things that they would say if they felt comfortable within their own skin and their culture. But then they're also going to withhold things that are going to be valuable to the work environment.
That's
and
true.
So I've learned a ton from working with some dynamic folks who lived themselves and were themselves, and they were unapologetic for it. And then that allowed me to feel more comfortable in saying, okay, well, if they can, be themselves or, say the thing that they're really thinking and feeling and make the joke that is the joke that they would make that's appropriate for a work environment,
Right.
then I can do that too. And so now I'm finding out that I'm able to show up in spaces a lot better because now I'm not second guessing myself so much to think, is this socially acceptable? It's socially acceptable because it's me and I'm valuable and I add value. And if someone is caught up in the way that I pronounce a word,
Right.
then they're not understanding the message behind the word.
Exactly. Yeah, I totally agree with that. And that we're aligned here with that. That does make for a strong team, strong leadership group, strong partnership, regardless of who you're working with.
Yeah.
Having those differences and knowing the wiggle room to play. It's like even in certain professional settings, that doesn't mean like you can go do and say anything at all, because that thing can be counterproductive if it's contradictory to the guidelines of the mission or values of the partnership or company that you're working with.
Right.
But at the same time, those differences do bring a lot of value to any partnership or business relationship.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's a huge value in being different.
Yeah.
And I encourage you, as you encourage me, as we encourage all of those watching the Woods Collab podcast, to be different as well. Be different. Know who you are. Understand the differences of other people. I dare you to, and we dare you to get closer to what those differences are. If that person will let you in, to understand it. So now you can work with that person, work with those people a bit different because you're coming from a place of understanding of it. And we talked about, we also talked about the code switching. What are your thoughts on code switching? Do you code switch? Do you think that's a thing, or people just roaming and being fluid in the environment that they're in?
Roaming, I like that.
Yeah. What is it? What is it to you? How do you assess it? How do you be different? How are you different? How do you show up with others who are different than you?
All right, well, that's our time today. That was a lot of fun, just really digging into conversations. And as you can see, diversity looks different, right? We had diversity viewpoints and diverse thoughts. And so we definitely want to hear what your thoughts are. And we want to know if you want us to continue to talk about this topic and concept, diversity in the workplace. So thank you so much.
Woods Collab Podcast.